Welcome to the Accepted Authority podcast, where we help you overcome a common growth challenge for your consulting business. With me, as always, is Greg Rowith. G'day, Greg.
G'day, Andy.
How are you going this morning?
Yeah, going pretty well. Looking forward to our chat today.
Me too. And thanks for joining us. So today, our topic is how do we increase customer value? Now, we raise this because I've noticed it a lot in recent conversations where as consulting leaders, we often get caught up with chasing new business or being so involved in the project itself. As soon as we win something, then I think understanding that there's so much opportunity with our existing customers, how do we constantly evolve it and grow it from a $100,000 engagement, to a $300,000 engagement? So let's pick apart that, if you like, Greg, and maybe we can start with, what's your experience been? I know you've worked in large consulting firms as a consultant, but obviously now helping other consultants to grow their business. Like, why do you feel that's a challenge to grow existing business?
Yeah, it's a topic that comes up a lot. In fact, I was just talking to another client about this situation this morning, where she was talking about, finishing a project with a client, and that relationship ending with that client. And I spoke to her about really taking the opportunity to see that relationship with a client where there's a level of trust established. There's an existing relationship, but to make sure there's a system in place to have a conversation about what else they can do for that client. And there's a number of services, and typically as consultants we have a number of different things we're able to do, and clients present to us with a specific problem, and we often start an engagement around fixing that problem. But when we're working with the client, there's an opportunity to say, what else is going on? What else is happening in your business? And why don't we have a look and see if there's other ways I can add value and provide some solutions for you. And I think, it's pretty easy for us to get involved with the client and look after the work we're doing and think that's enough, and think that the client will, if they're happy enough with what we would do, they might ask us what else we can do. But typically if we don't tell them, they don't know. So I think it really is part of our process that we should systemize, is that we need to have that what else can we do conversation with every client that we work with.
Absolutely. And one thing that I've seen as well, Greg, is if we go in with a specific system, or I call it a signature system, but if you have, say, a micro engagement or a service that you can really show this is the value you can provide, then at least you can start to map out a bit more of an opportunity funnel, if you like. So this is where we start, but as a leader, we need to be focused on, this is the vision for this account. And so how do we go about building that vision and actually being proactive enough to if your team is working on the client, then how do we get in front of that? How do we be proactive in terms of building those conversations and building the opportunity value?
Yeah, well, this is actually a favorite topic of mine. I think it really does come back to how we sell ourselves to our clients. So right back to our marketing system, where we're educating our clients through that buying journey of what problems that we solve and what we can do for our client. And even in the sales conversation, being able to identify that perhaps the problem they're presenting with is just a symptom of a deeper root cause. And when we can help them understand that we need to work on not just the problem that they're telling us about, but the things that are causing that problem to occur, then we can establish a foundation for probably a deeper level and maybe a longer lasting relationship with that client. So, there's a number of methods that we can use. One of my favorites is to have models or frameworks to describe, what situation they're in, where they want to be and how we can help them. But to be able to set up in that, process framework of how we work with our clients, show them that there's actually a number of steps involved in that process. So, the first thing we do with them is the first thing we do. So we're already pre-selling the likelihood that there will be more things to do once we finish step one. And one of the favorite things that I've seen work and we've used initially is not to sell them straight up with a solution, but to start the engagement with a diagnostic process where we go in and work with that client, to really find out all the issues that are occurring and then be able to recommend, the way forward. And often that is, well, here's step one, where we need to start and tackle the biggest problem. But once we've solved that, then there are other things that need to be worked on as well. And then, we're already pre-selling the fact that, there's more to do. So, ideally, rather than getting in that situation where, you start to work with the client about solving their problem, if you've got a better sales and marketing process in place, you can already pre-sell that ongoing work relationship before you even start at stage one.
I love that, Greg. And I think when you talked about models, there's such a powerful tool. And there's what we'll do is we'll share a reference sheet for you in the notes. But if you can figure out what we're saying there is, if you can figure out a natural pathway that just doesn't end with your initial piece of work, but actually shows the journey. And I know you've got a great pathway. I think it's like a 9-step process, or maybe there's a 6-step process. It used to be
nine steps.
9 steps, exactly. I've got a 3-step process for the initial 12 weeks, and it just helps the client visualize what's the transformation pathway you're taking them on. And from a model point of view, how are you able to then articulate it? Because visuals are a great way to communicate that value. So, okay, so what we've said there is establish a pathway, which is great. And so say, what if a common challenge that I'm hearing a lot now is for clients that are larger, sort of enterprise, there's often multiple touch points. So how do we go about ensuring that some of those relationships aren't lost, or the opportunity isn't diminished because we're so focused on solving this problem over here?
Yeah. And this is one that I learnt the hard way.
Please share.
Yeah. Personal experience. I was working with a client where, I'd been, typically I work with the owners of the business or, the senior management level. But in this case, they were a larger organization. And one of the projects that we'd identified as needing to be done required me to work with the sales team and the sales manager rather than the CEO. So I happily went off and worked with the sales team, and we got good results with that. But once that project was finished, then that was the end of the relationship. And what I'd forgotten, or really what I learned through that process, is we've got to do two things at the same time. We've got to do good work and make sure that we're getting results in the work we're doing. But we also have to focus on the relationship with the real client at the same time. So making sure that we're, not just reporting back on work progress, but building the relationship through additional added value things, or really looking at supporting the client as we working on the project that we're engaged on.
That's so true, and thank you for sharing, Greg. It's exactly the case. I think I've had a similar experience where I've been working with, I guess, the employees, so the operations or whoever in the team, marketing in the team. But really, if the business owner is not happy, then I went through a situation where essentially we were working with this team, and little I know that the business owner wasn't happy with the people we were working with. So I spent 4 months building this relationship. They got the flick, and the business owner kind of said, "Oh, look, yeah, these people aren't working out. We're going to put everything on hold, and we'll bring in some other person." So exactly what you're saying. I completely forgot to ensure that who's the person that actually pays the bills. Well, it's the business owner. The employee. They are obviously an important relationship, but we just need to focus on that. I just want to touch on something that also comes to mind as well, Greg, with, when we win a piece of work. Say, for example, when we win the work, and for whatever reason, there just isn't an opportunity right now. What I've learned is that we really need to focus on having a communications cadence that doesn't just stop with a couple of emails or a couple of phone calls, but we also realize that in consulting, opportunities will come up 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. So maybe in a 3-year period, you might get 3 or 4 engagements, but it might just start with one micro engagement. So even this morning, a professional services client, they sent me an email and said to a reply to a case study, so customer story that we did about solving a cybersecurity problem. And it was a genuine lead, genuine opportunity. And they said, "Look, I love the story. Can you do something like that for me?" So and they, they've been a lapsed client, if you like. So I think when we're thinking about the initial engagement, even if we don't, for whatever reason, there's budgets, or it's not the right time. Maybe we're at Christmas time. It's so important to be able to then think strategically around, well, how can we continue to add value and be top of mind? I just referenced that one point of call, but what would your feedback on that be around how do we engage those lapsed clients?
And again, doing it the wrong way has taught me to look at things differently and look at how I can improve my process, because I've often been in that situation where we've reached a certain milestone point with clients, and they, sometimes the effort of getting there is such that they need to take a break, and they're not unhappy with what we're doing, but they just need to implement some of the things and make sure they're working, and before they move on to the next stage. So it's been a halt in the relationship, or just being put on hold. But typically, if we wait for the client to come back to us and say, "Okay, let's go," next step, never happens. But the next worst thing is to be calling that client up and saying, "Well, how are things going? Are you ready to take the next step yet?" That's just looks like, oh, you're hungry and you're desperate and need more work, and maybe they think, "Oh, that's not such a good situation." So again, coming back to my favorite saying of being the savior, not the servant, and where the servant basically delegates the responsibility for getting things done to the client, where the client tells us what to do and when they're ready to do it, and all of that process. Being the savior means that in that relationship where the client justifiably needs a pause, or the project's finished and they're not ready to take on the next project, it's about maintaining that level of authority in the relationship, where we understand what the client needs probably better than they do. And so we can say, "Right, okay, yep, I understand that you need to pause at the moment, but let's make a plan for re-engaging and moving on to the next project. So there's certain things that you need to do right now to make sure what we've done gets implemented and is working effectively. So if there's any faltering in that process, let's get in touch, and I'll be in touch monitoring how that's going. But we need to set a timeline on when we go to the next project. So what sort of timing do you need? When do you think that could start? And let's plan for that. So really being more assertive and authoritative in that process, and not just leaving it to the client, but building on that relationship where we are the authority, we know what they need, and really being proactive in that process of engaging, monitoring, and restarting when we think it's necessary, and not being pushy or but just being helpful and being the authority, like a doctor would be if there's a monitoring process needed and we need to go back for another checkup in a year's time. They're calling us, or their assistant is calling us saying it's time for your appointment, and expecting that to be done, not not trying to sell us on the need for it at that point.
Yes.
Yeah,
definitely. And I love your savior, be a savior, not a servant, and you made a really great distinction there, Greg, taking control of it, and actually you are the authority. You know the space inside out. It's not up for the client to talk about what they think they need. I always like to think of professional services or consulting as basically professionally helping someone to solve a problem, and that's what we're hired to do. So building on that, as you say, with advice, so actual advisory, taking away the I guess the emotion, if you like, of well, I really want this client to extend, but what is best for them right now. And I remember there was a conversation I've had a couple of weeks ago, and the client said, look, I really want to engage, but I just need 3 months to get A, B, and C in place, and then can we reach out and have a chat? And I think respecting that idea of, well, if you constantly build that trust, and this can be done through, as I say, communication cadence, whether it's emails is a good starting point, but you want to continue to be authoritative and continue that influence, and simply be helpful, whether it's sharing other great helpful resources along the way, just to say, look, I'm not here to call and ask if are you ready? Well, as we know, it's not viable, it's not scalable.
No. Yeah. No, I love what you said about what's best for the client, and that needs to be the place we're starting from. Not what do we want, but if we have as our focus what's best for the client, we'll often know that better than they do. And so we can have that, authority in that relationship where we can work and really re-emphasize, this is the best thing for you right now. We shouldn't hesitate any longer, and go ahead with the next stage. And you're not selling, you're not doing it for your benefit, but really doing it for the benefit of the client.
Exactly. And I remember a coaching firm that I did some work with. We did a vision statement for them, 3 years, and they talked about wanting to have 20-year contracts with clients. And when you think of it like that way, or even 10 years, it's like, okay, here's 3 months of work, but we want to be involved in your success for the next 5 years, 10 years, the life cycle of your business. Then when it comes to actually thinking about that 3-month engagement, it just really put things in perspective for me, because I went, of course, well, that's the natural value of growing that. And actually growing, because you're growing as a business as well. You're not going to stand still. They're also going to be able to grow too. So I think that will also set you apart as well from every other firm, is thinking about long-term That's what we want.
That's right. I think there's almost a pride in, for some some consultants to think that they've done their job when the client doesn't need you anymore. And it's about, shifting and moving on from working with that client because, you've solved the problem and, it shouldn't be a long-term engagement. But I always look at it is, what's the client's next problem? When we've solved this problem, we create the next problem, and wouldn't it be great if we could help them with that as well? So I love that concept of a 20-year engagement. So far, my longest engagement with a client is 7 years, and that's and that's only stopped because I sold the business. And they still, were engaged with the people who bought the business from me. So, it's when you understand that you continue to add value, and the client loves it because they're always getting value and improving their situation with that relationship, then the longevity of a relationship is something to be proud about.
Absolutely, Greg. So really what we're recapping our conversation today, we're talking about customer value and how to improve it. Essentially, we want to think long-term. We want to have a system, or at least show them a pathway, a journey, a transformation about where we're going to get to, so it's pre-sold. And I guess the last thing we sort of touched on there was around phrasing and thinking about what's best for the client, and really being a true professional consultant. We're professionally helping someone. So thank you, Greg. Now, if you have enjoyed the podcast today, and I'm sure you have, then would love a ratings on either iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, because it simply helps create more impact for us with other business owners in the consulting environment. So, Greg, I want to thank you. Thanks for your time today. Now, where can we find you?
LinkedIn is a good place to see me. We're at just search for Greg Roworth, or my website, businessflightpath.com, where I offer some free reports that, particularly in relation to what we're talking about today, my free report called The Consultant's Guide to Attracting More Premium Clients might be something that you have an interest in, and there's a free download that's available on my website.
Awesome. You can find me at Andy Marmont on LinkedIn. Concurve.com.au is the website, and we've put up a short video, 5-minute video about the 3 blockers to what's stopping you from growing your consulting firm. Sort of talks about my approach to growing consulting firms. So if you want to check that one out on either YouTube or my LinkedIn profile, feel free to do so. So thanks again. We'll see you all next week. And this has been The Accepted Authority.
Great. Thanks, Andy.